Thank you. And may I just start by thanking you, Sister Helen, and Your Eminence, Paolo and Gustavo, for this wonderful invitation. It is truly an honor to be here. And so thank you very much for inviting me. Paolo, I'd also like to thank you specifically for some of the work you've been doing in transatlantic law situation. There's a beautiful conference in Florence, and I'm on the board of an organization that finds that very, very helpful. So thank you for that. I feel that I am outnumbered a bit in this room, and I will admit, as I speak to my students, I often tell them that it's good to own your bias. So I will come to you fully saying that I am coming from a very American worldview. And I spent the last 13 years working in the American legislature, working for the United States Congress, where there is near continual discussion and consternation about what policies work and what policies don't work, and what we have tried and what we should try again. And so through that lens, I think a little history and reflection is helpful. There is not consensus, though I'm not sure right now in America there's consensus on much, but there is significant agreement that the regulatory approach that America took in the early 90s to the emergence of the internet was the right approach. That the light touch regulatory framework that then President Bill Clinton signed into law really paved the way for an absolutely tremendous American economic and technological dominance. As we approach this, the economy and the business growth led to some of the dominance that we've been discussing over the last day and a half in this room. Companies that were at the time just regular companies became global power. These include Microsoft and Google and Verizon and AT&T. As of right now, 67 of the top 100 companies by market cap are American companies. Of the top companies that were invented after the invention of the internet, 15 of the 20 top companies are American companies. Some of the companies that have been discussed here in this room, and that includes NVIDIA, Apple, Meta, Tesla, Broadcom. And I will say that America is proud of that. And we think that it shows that a light regulatory approach was beneficial to our economy, was beneficial to the development of these technologies, and has been beneficial for our country's sovereignty. When we look at why we made this choice, part of it is because at the time, and I think now, there is a belief that overregulation does a lot of harm, that it hinders innovation, that it stifles development, that it creates competitive disadvantages, and it burdens small and mid-sized companies, the same small and mid-sized companies that many people in this room want to thrive and grow to compete against some of the larger companies that have been discussed so much over the last 24 hours. In the early 90s, the American economy was roughly parallel to the European economy. Now, America has a GDP of 1.5 times that of the European economy. And the shift largely happened post-2008 and is largely attributable to the American tech dominance. And there are a lot of economists in this room that will say that might be an oversimplification. But in my 9 minutes, I will say I'm going to admit that it is an oversimplification, but it also rings true. And while I believe that we had the right approach with light touch regulation in the internet, that doesn't necessarily mean that we got everything right. And so if we got light touch regulation right, when we think about regulating the internet, what did we maybe miss? And I would posit here that there might have been some missteps in the light touch approach to social media that ended up kind of being a no touch approach to social media. And what we are seeing now in America specifically, significant screen addiction, significant mental rot, mental pollution, I think was a word that was used earlier today, which I love and will now steal. Significant privacy violations, cyberbullying, mental health problems, and polarization of our country. And so what is the lesson that we can take from that? I think the previous speaker just kind of laid out a really beautiful comparison, which is having a very light touch regulation on the development of AI itself. We are not trying to regulate how many CPUs can be used in each thing. That's not a thing that we can do. We will not be successful in that. But can we be successful in stopping harmful use cases? Can we be successful in protecting the interactions at the human level? Can we be successful in protecting humans? And in listening to the conversations, I feel very optimistic that there are many things that there is agreement on. Maybe not agreement in the details, and I understand the details are important, but agreement in the larger picture. I would say transparency. How that looks is going to be a question. We hear it's a concern, but we've heard it from many, many speakers. Transparency. Do you have, as a human, a right to know if you're interacting with another human? The children who have been interacting with chatbots and have been divulging all of their secrets, things that they would never tell their parents and that they don't have best friends to tell, so they're turning to chatbots. Does that person have a right to know that they're interacting with you? If you have an insurance claim that gets denied, do you have a right to know that the insurance claim was denied because of an algorithm and therefore there is an appeal process? Or is it supposed to be some sort of black box? I would argue that there is a strong use case here that transparency is going to be very, very important, and is something that I think many, many different elements can agree on and get behind. Privacy is another one. We've heard this talked about here, but also as we think about the dignity of the human person. In our era, in 2025, I would argue that the dignity of a human person extends to their digital footprint, that everything that we do is so intrinsically personal, and that dignity should be protected. And I think that wraps into privacy. And all of that wraps into this idea of needing to protect the common good, to protect children, to protect these harmful interactions that we see so often. And I think there is real commonplace agreement on how we might be able to protect humans at the level. It reminds me of something that Pope John Paul II wrote in Evangelii Vitae, which is respect for life requires that science and technology should always be at the service of man and his integral development. Speaking directly to the development of these humans, and especially the young children and emerging children who are so continuously fed this technology stream, there are places there in privacy and transparency and in figuring out ways to create trustworthy applications that we can protect kind of the human element. And the last thing that I would want to speak to is national security. And this is something that has been talked about a little bit. And as we think about national sovereignty, I would highlight that we believe and we know that the dual track technology that we're talking about here will end up supporting national security capabilities of countries that are actively planning military actions against. And so to act as though that's not happening, I think kind of belies and ignores a significant problem. And I would note, so in 2025, America had 2 presidents in the month of January. President Biden's term ended on January 20th and President Trump's term began. And in the month of January, we had 2 executive orders. Both presidents issued executive orders on AI. President Biden issued his right before leaving office. President Trump issued his right after coming into office. I share that to say, this is not a political issue. This is not a partisan issue. This is not Americans fighting amongst themselves. And if we just wait till the next president comes in, someone's going to have a better result. America is committed to AI dominance because we believe it is necessary for our national security. We are committed to winning the race because we believe it is important for our national security and that it is also important for the salvation of Western civilization. And so I will not minimize that. I will say that within that framework, let's find ways that we can work together. So what I will say, what we've learned from that, I will say we believe the bar is very, very high to impose regulations on this technology, but on those places where we meet the bar, privacy, transparency, protecting our kids, we have to get it right. And so for those of you working in transatlantic law issues, I'm very welcoming these conversations, and thank you very much for having me.